Christ is among us.
He is, and always shall be.
Good evening. Have a seat for a second. So here, I have a question for you. Anybody here a Clint Eastwood fan? Anybody like Clint Eastwood?
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood made iconic a certain kind of meme, if you will, a certain kind of character type in the movies, the mysterious stranger, the man with no name, right? And you see these throughout, especially in Westerns. It's a very popular theme in Westerns, but they pop up over and over again. They repeat. An interesting version of it I just saw, I was watching last night with my wife, the movie, Christopher Nolan movie, Tenet. Tenet is not the name of the character. The character has no name. His name is protagonist. That's like an in-your-face riff on that whole idea. The mysterious stranger, the man with no name. He has no name in the whole movie. All he says is, I'm the protagonist of this mission, he says. That's as close as you ever get to finding out what his name is. And this is a theme. The mysterious stranger is imbued with power, because the mysterious stranger is capable of coming into a situation and doesn't fit into any of the roles of society, right? So the mysterious stranger somehow moves in between and is able to do amazing things. And those are kind of some of our great heroes in our stories that we tell ourselves. Another kind of variant on this is not so much a character with no name, but a character who adopts a new identity, right? And that's huge in superhero stories, right? How many of our superhero stories, they're people who adopt a secret identity, right, to protect others. And the secret identity, like the mysterious stranger, provides them, like, not their superpower, but in a way it does, it's the guise under which they can exercise their power. And of course, we're eating up these stories as well. Have a seat, Max, you're fine. Just slide across, you're good. Well, today we are celebrating a mysterious stranger, a person who donned a costume and adopted another identity in order to bring incredible grace into the world, a superpower unlike any other. And yes, I am talking about Saint Ksenia of St. Petersburg. Saint Ksenia, like a superhero story of old, has a tragic beginning to her story, right? Her origin story is that she was married to a dashing young colonel, very wealthy, aristocratic. Everything was looking up in life. It was a whirlwind adventure of life, and this was in the early 1700s. So very classic kind of imperial Russian era, right? Beautiful, everything elegant. And then suddenly he died, unexpectedly. And she was only 26 years old. And it just crushed her and broke her. And she looked at all of this glitz and all of the glamour and all of the balls and all of the things, and they lost their luster. They lost all the beauty. And she realized the grave was the only truth there. And there was had to be something more than all of that. And so she decided, for whatever reason, to dress as her dead husband, put on his uniform, and give away all of that wealth and all of that gold and all of that finery, and live as her husband, since he had died young and could no longer be on this earth. And effectively, she became homeless. So people thought she went crazy. People thought she had lost her mind, that her heart had been broken and her mind had gone with it. And she became, like what we call in America a bag lady, right? Going through the streets. gathering what she could, begging for scraps, things like that. Still wearing, for all those years, the coat of the officer until it was ragged and falling to pieces. And the people of St. Petersburg, I don't know, maybe they should have done more to help her, but if you've ever worked with somebody who's, let's say, cognitively different, you know that there's a limit. It's not. There's one of the most humbling things you can ever do is try to work with somebody who's just not. We're playing by the same deck of cards that you are. And whatever the case was, she persevered in this way of life. But the people of St. Petersburg began to realize that there was something going on around her. There was a holiness that was beginning to be experienced by people. She would pray for them and things would happen. Or she would tell them things that would come to pass. And eventually people started to realize they had what in Eastern Christian parlance is called a fool for Christ. That is to say, it's not just a mentally ill person. Maybe they were, or maybe still are in some respect, cognitively different, whatever you want to call it, diverse. But there's some holiness in that specific person, because of the faith that they had and the logic with which they're approaching their life. It becomes an ascetic practice, a life of prayer, a life of suffering and sacrifice for the other, for the sake of somebody you love, and in extension for the whole world. And so eventually, poor St. Ksenia departed this life in peace at a very old age, somewhere around 1800. So, what, a couple 120 years ago or so. And they buried her in a beautiful tomb. And people began to go to her tomb and say memorials for her, to pray for her soul. And they would find that when they did that, good things happened to them too. If they had a problem, they had a fear, they had a worry, they had a concern, they would go and they would pray for St. Ksenia at her tomb, say a kind memorial, a kind word for her, and things would happen. And so finally then, in 1988, the Moscow Patriarchate, at the 1,000-year anniversary of Orthodoxy in Russia, recognized her as one of the new saints, and she's been canonized ever since. So now people still flock to her tomb, which is quite beautiful. And there, instead of doing the memorials, they do the akathist. Yeah, maybe we'll do the akathist tomorrow morning. We've done that before in the past. It's very nice. Pray for our nation through her prayers. And the superpower of the mysterious stranger, and by the way, that's what her name means. Ksenia, or Xenia, and from the Greek, means literally the stranger, the foreigner, the one from outside. Right? Like Zeno from outside. She lived outside of society's norms. She lived outside of every expectation we would have for a young widow and a young woman. She lived outside of our expectations of a wealthy person. She lived outside of any expectation of a human being. And as a result, opened the door to heaven for many to come inside. Paradise. What an incredible superpower that is. What an incredibly heroic life that was. And maybe we'll see another like her. There was just recently in Bulgaria reposed a saint very similar. A man who was kind of known as the Saint of Sofia, I think, in the city there, who would go and beg for alms for the poor. Lived as a homeless person himself, but spent all day begging for charity for other people. And had that same quality, kind of a fool for Christ. Just recently, just a few years ago, passed away. We see them. Christ shows himself in these people to us in a way more intimately, maybe more special than any other type of saint, I think. And so we will praise her, we'll bless and honor her holy memory, and look for Christ in our neighbor through her example. Christ is among us.
He is my shouting.
God bless you. I will